and we're focusing this panel on European neighbourhood and geopolitics. So I'm just going to briefly introduce our panel, most of whom will need no introduction. So on my left, we have Minister Alexander Schallenberg, delighted to have a representative from the Austrian government. Minister Schallenberg serves as Federal Minister for European and International Affairs. So thanks very much for joining us. We are also joined by President Vjosa Osmani of Kosovo, President of Kosovo. So very warm welcome to you too. Thank you. Oleksandra Matovichuk is the founder and head of the Center for Civil Liberties. She's a Ukrainian lawyer, and this CCL was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2022, so you're very welcome too. And finally, again, a name that I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with. We're joined by Zviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. It's the opposition leader of Belarus. And according to independent observers, the real winner of the election there in 2020. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for all of you for joining, which we will come back to. And your comments there on enlargement transitions very nice to President Osmani about Kosovo. Maybe you could talk to us a bit about your thoughts now, this idea of bold Europe, and what are the issues that you think are priority for you in your country?
Thank you, but let me perhaps start by saying that it's such a great pleasure to be among all of you today, and coming from the youngest country in Europe, both in terms of the age of our country as well as the age of our population, is such a great pleasure to be among so many young people from all around the world. So especially a great welcome to the continent of Europe from those that are coming from outside of Europe. I do agree, and it's a great continuation of what the minister just said and what the president of the forum initially mentioned in his remarks. Absolutely, a bold Europe is an enlarged Europe, an enlarged European Union, one that clearly understands that including the Western Balkans within the EU is a key to the principle of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. In fact, we should all understand that the Western Balkans is not just some faraway neighborhood. In fact, it's a crucial part of Europe, it's at the heart of Europe, and it's a part that can actually contribute to Europe's further stability, to Europe's further development economically. And with the human potential that the Western Balkans has, it can contribute to more energized projects and some that are extremely bold, whether we're talking about a green Europe, whether we're talking about more investment into green energy, but also a Europe where countries that are truly contributing to the principles on which the European Union has been founded on are also giving their contributions to those principles. The European Union is the most important economic and peace project, I would say, in the history of humanity. And as such, we need to understand that despite the frustration, despite disappointments, we should never look elsewhere. For my country, this has always been the case. We have never looked elsewhere. We have never flirted with any other, I would say, path. The European Union is the strategic orientation not just of politicians and institutions, but it's deeply engraved within the opinions and the will of our people. Therefore, we will definitely never look elsewhere. But we do see fatigue. We see fatigue both within the members of the European Union on whether they are ready or not to include other members. But fatigue is also present among Western Balkan countries. I mean, it took North Macedonia so many years to just start the negotiation process. Montenegro has been striving to move forward, but things are going extremely slow. We had to wait for 10 years to just finish the visa liberalization process. Finally, the brilliant youth of Kosovo, who are also present here today, next year will come back to Alpbach Forum without a visa for the very first time. After really... After having completed the criteria for visa liberalization, in fact, many, many years ago, I really want to commend and thank Austria for being such a strong voice of support for freedom of movement for the people of Kosovo, but also for being such a strong voice for the inclusion of the Western Balkans into the enlargement process of the European Union. It's one of the countries that has always been bold on that one, perhaps because you're closer to us and you know the potential. You don't look at the Western Balkans as a burden, but as countries that can truly contribute to a stronger Europe. Secondly, I think a bold Europe is a principled Europe, especially in the wake of the war in Ukraine, with what Belarus, the people of Belarus are going through. We need to understand that talking about values is not enough. Acting upon those values is fundamental for a bold Europe. Human rights, democracy, and the rule of law should be fundamental requirements for any aspiring member, but also fundamentals for those who are within the European Union as members already. And finally, when it comes to principles, as we have learned throughout history, but it looks like, no, we haven't learned enough, appeasement of autocrats goes against the principles that form the foundation of the European Union. The more autocrats in Europe and beyond are appeased, they are emboldened, they are encouraged to commit aggression against their neighbors, to violate human rights, to violate every principle of rule of law, to not respect others, and obviously get even more and more encouragement to violate the rules-based international order. And for that reason, it is essential that within the European Union, bold decisions are also principled decisions. And we not only adopt statements that talk about values, but also either in bilateral relations or within the Union, or when looking at aspiring members, we truly persist and insist on asking for rule of law, human rights, and democracy. And my final point, and again, to agree with the Minister, a bold Europe is a united Europe, one where decisions are made together with one another, but also made at the right time, because sometimes not learning from mistakes of the past and not learning from history leads to historical mistakes. But at the same time, unity should not sacrifice the values. I do understand how difficult it is to take those unanimous decisions within the European Union, but never, never at the expense of rule of law, never at the expense of democracy, never at the expense of values that are the very fundament of what the European Union is all about. I believe that unity is fundamental for our success versus autocracies and versus tyrannies. And unity on enlargement is also in the strategic interest of the European Union itself, as the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine said. Of course, it's in our interest to join the EU, but I believe strategically speaking, as it was proven with the candidate status for Ukraine and Moldova, it's also in the strategic interest of the European Union. And my final point, I believe that a bold Europe is also one that values the Euro-Atlantic partnership. The role of the United States has proven fundamental and pivotal in keeping and preserving the peace, the stability, but also the success of what Europe is all about. So that partnership, as I think, is fundamental in making sure that Europe continues its success, but also we are successful in making sure that Ukraine wins, and also making sure that those nations that are truly honest in terms of working based on the values that the EU stands for are the ones that also move forwards towards joining the Euro-Atlantic partnership. So that's in terms of introduction. I look forward to answering questions.
Thank you. Lots of points to pick up on there. Now, President Osmani, because you're a diplomat, you didn't say this, and I'm not expecting you to say, but we do know that certain countries in the Western Balkans have become closer to Russia in the last few years. I'm thinking of Serbia, for example, and you made the point there that Kosovo has maintained its kind of commitment to Europe. But, I mean, I think everyone in this room would be familiar with the fact that in the last few months we've been reading headlines about a kind of resurgence of tensions in North Kosovo. How are things now, and do you think that's going to impact negatively both countries' accession prospects? Maybe you'd kind of bring us up to date on that.
Well, first of all, I don't think I need to talk about who Serbia is. It's so obvious. It's a country that it's not in between. There's no gray zone there. They have picked Russia for their partner. It's the only European country without sanctions against Russia. It's the only country in the Western Balkans that commits aggression against its neighbors. And it's a country that it's, I think, at a 36% alignment with the EU. In contrast, Kosovo and many of our neighbors are at a 100% alignment with every foreign and security policy decision of the European Union, including immediate sanctions against Russia on day one, including updating those sanctions, not just in line with European Union decisions, but also the decisions of our partners in the United States. We are supporting the people of Ukraine in any way that we can. We are hosting journalists from Ukraine because we believe that defending and telling the truth at times of war is fundamental in fighting the Russian propaganda. But just because we have an aggressive neighbor, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't undertake our reforms in getting closer and closer to the European Union, and that's exactly what we have been doing. But having an aggressive neighbor means that you will constantly have security problems, and that's what we're facing in the north of Kosovo. Now, just let me clarify one point. Only 1/3 of the Serbs that live around Kosovo, who are around 3 to 4% of our population, but only 1/3 of these 3 to 4% actually live in the north. 2/3 of the Serbs live in the south, in the east, and the west, and they are perfectly integrated within the society and the institutions. In the north, because they border Serbia, of course, they were more instrumentalized by Belgrade. But apart from being political, the problem in the north is a rule of law problem. We're dealing with gangs.
Yeah.
We're dealing with transnational organized crime groups. And that's not just me calling them transnational organized crime groups. The US State Department, the United Kingdom have called them transnational organized crime groups. These are extremely dangerous groups that are mostly terrifying, terrorizing, intimidating, and even killing, in the case of politician Oliver Ivanovic, Serb citizens. So it is the Serbs who live in the north that are actually paying the highest price because of these groups. So once, of course, we tried to fight these organized crime groups, there was violence, and that's one of the things that we're facing at this point. So we ask for the support of Europe because by defending rule of law, by defending innocent citizens from these organized crime groups, we are actually standing up for what European Union stands for, which is rule of law, human rights, and democracy. And my final point on where are we right now when it comes to finding solutions to the recent tensions. On the 1st of September, we're going to have new administrative decisions in place when it comes to organizing new elections in the north. And then it's up to the citizens whether they want to participate in these elections or not. We ask for the support of our, especially EU and US partners, in stopping Vučić from illegal interference in the elections of another country and stopping him from, through his illegal gangs, intimidating Serbs from participating in free elections.
Yeah, because just to come in here, because there is nobody on the panel representing Serbia, obviously there was a lot of issues that Brussels and Washington had about those elections that were held by Kosovo earlier in the year. So just to be clear on that, because I am conscious that Serbia is not
elections were fully supported by both Washington and Brussels. An action of mayors entering the building,
their offices,
which is very separate. From the holding of elections. Elections were held in full compliance and coordination with our partners.
So do you worry, apart from that specific situation that's now flared up, but do you worry, I know, we were talking about earlier about, you were saying there that respect for Ukraine who's now on this accession path, but do countries in the Western Balkans feel hard done by, that they have been waiting in the wings for so long, and now all the attention is on Ukraine, saying, oh, Ukraine, needs a path to European membership. That must be, do you feel ambivalent about that? Is that difficult for countries like your own country that's been, diligently working towards EU accession, not really progressing very far, and all of a sudden all the attention now is on Ukraine and Moldova also?
Now, I know that some of my fellow leaders in the Western Balkans felt that way. I'm certainly not one of them. I very much welcomed the moving further of the accession process for both Ukraine and Moldova. And I think that actually woke up Europe in terms of what its own strategic interest. And I truly believe that in that sense, it helped EU member states understand that the more countries that truly believe in the EU values are brought in, the better. So I think that fundamentally helps the further integration of the Western Balkans. And I think, of course, the attention is rightly on Ukraine because, as it was perfectly pointed out, Russia has waged a war on Europe, on all of us. And the Western Balkans actually should be seen as part of the bigger picture because the minister clearly said there's never a vacuum. Russia has always been interested to expand its malign influence in the Western Balkans. Now, of course, in Kosovo, we never allowed it. And we're the only country in the Western Balkans that are not part of the China Road and Belt Initiative. But that doesn't mean that we should just stop fighting this malign influence. Russia has historically been interested to destabilize Europe through the Western Balkans. So I think it's part of the bigger picture if we keep both the Western Balkans as well as Ukraine at the center of attention.
Okay, so it's a positive development for everyone. You know, it can lift the tide, if you like. So can you just talk to us a bit about, in your own country, I mean, I know a lot of